Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I've received confirmation that we are streaming, and it is 5:30, so if you'd like to begin the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Good afternoon, Council, members of SLT, and members of the viewing public. I see that we have quorum, so I call this meeting into session. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you could just give us one moment, we'll be sharing our screen for the opening remarks.
Oh, we didn't do pecuniary interest.
We will get to that. Sorry, this is just the opening Zoom remarks, which is that this is a public meeting under the Planning Act. All Town of Pelham in-person public meetings have been canceled. Instead, the town is holding all meetings electronically via Zoom. Please note, no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. The Planning Department will be providing a presentation regarding the subject application. Participants are reminded, ensure your background is free from offensive or vulgar material. If inappropriate material is visible, you'll be removed from the meeting. Vulgar or offensive language will not be tolerated. If inappropriate language is used, you'll be removed from the meeting. Participant microphones and video cameras will remain off until they are called to speak. Once your comments have been heard by council, your microphone will be muted and turned off. Decorum. The public meeting under the Planning Act is a formal public hearing requiring decorum, meaning all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak, you'll be given an opportunity to address council at the public portion of the meeting. If you are live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please email clerks@pelham.ca. Please note, comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting, otherwise they will not be considered. Disrespectful comments will not be tolerated. Cheering, booing, or hissing from the gallery will not be tolerated. Please note, if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons asked to leave. Public portion of the meeting. To allow for an efficient meeting, each member of the public will be given the opportunity to speak to council during the public portion of the meeting. Please note, after all members of the public have been given the opportunity to speak, the agent/applicant will have the opportunity to address the public comments concerns at one time. Please note, all comments stated and received electronically will form part of the public record and will be considered by planning staff when preparing the recommendation report for council's consideration. If you wish to receive a copy of the Notice of Decision, please contact the planner responsible for this application in writing as soon as possible. Curtis Thompson, Planner, 20 Pelham Town Square, P.O. Box 400, Fonthill, Ontario, LOS 1E0, C. Thompson@pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found on the Town of Pelham's website. Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, and that concludes the opening remarks.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. I believe next is the adoption of agenda.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson that the agenda for the March 8th, 2021 public meeting under the Planning Act, special meeting of Committee of the Whole, be adopted as circulated. If there's no other discussion, I would start the vote with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur. Councillor Kaur? Oh, thank you. Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and that does bring you to the disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Okay, and at this time, does any councillor, after viewing the agenda, have any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof to disclose? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. I have so noted. That does bring us to item number 4 of the agenda, and I do have notice requirements to read into the record, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Notice requirements. Application for zoning bylaw amendment, 855 Chandler Road, file AM-01-2021. A zoning bylaw amendment to prohibit further residential construction on farmland and to amend site-specific zoning provisions to facilitate a surplus farm dwelling consent resulting from a farm consolidation. The rezoning application is a condition of severance approval by the Town's Committee of Adjustment under File B4-2021P. The Planning Act requires, under Section 34, that Council must hold at least one public meeting for the purposes of informing the public in respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. This public meeting has been called to satisfy this requirement. Notice of this meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners in the last revised reassessment roll and within 120 meters of the subject property on February 10th, 2021. The notice provided information on the property, including the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the clerk in writing as soon as possible. Contact information is available on the town's website and will also be displayed on the last slide of staff's presentation to follow shortly. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, LPAT, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, the person, public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress at this point no decisions have been made on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and therefore any comments received will be taken into account for Council's consideration. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have our planner, Mr. Curtis Thompson, and he does have a presentation to share with Council.
Okay, Mr. Thompson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
The town has received an application for a zoning bylaw amendment for the lands at 855 Chandler Road. They're positioned on the north side of Chandler Road, just west of Church Street. The zoning bylaw amendment application, the purpose of it was required as a condition of severance approval. A couple months ago, the applicant applied to sever off a surplus farm dwelling, which is a result of a farm business consolidation. And under various planning policies, the retained farmland that's being consolidated is required to be rezoned to prevent further residential construction. On the sketch here, the retained land would be part 2, and then part 1 is the existing single detached dwelling that's been rendered surplus to the farmer's needs. So the details of the zoning bylaw amendment are to rezone the lands from the default agricultural or A zone to, in the case of part 1, to a site-specific agricultural zone, to increase the maximum accessory lot coverage and the maximum accessory building height. So there were existing barns and silos that were on the farm. They've been proposed to remain on the residential profile, and because of that, they exceed the height limit and the lot coverage requirement. And while they exceed the zoning provisions because they're no longer an agricultural building, by definition, they would fall under the accessory building provisions for a house. So they're quite a bit more conservative. There's a height limit, that's what has warranted the lot coverage request increase and the height increase for part 1. The retained farmland on part 2 is proposed to rezone from an agricultural to a site-specific agricultural zone, and the main purpose is to prohibit further residential development, but also to reduce the minimum lot frontage requirement. And that's more of a technicality because of the way the existing dwelling would bisect the frontage. It's measured as the narrowest frontage, although in this case, the cumulative frontage is still exceeding. So it's more technical in nature. Basically reiterating what I just said, the agricultural purposes only, often referred to as an APO zoning, is required under a number of policies. So the region of Niagara had required this as a condition of the severance approval as well as town planning staff. Looking at the policy framework, at a provincial level, in the provincial policy statement, the lands are designated as being within a prime agricultural area, as defined by the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture. The Greenbelt plan would not apply in this case as the property is positioned outside of the Greenbelt plan area. The growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the key natural heritage policies still apply to lands that aren't within the settlement area, but the merits of the development are outside of the key natural heritage features, so there's no issues on that end. The Niagara Region official plan designates the property as good general agricultural. And similarly, the town of Pelham official plan also has the property designated as good general agricultural. That's denoted approximately in the map here, the red circle. And as mentioned earlier, the current zoning on the lands is our default agricultural zone, which permits a variety of uses, namely agricultural, greenhouses, one single detached house on one lot, accessory buildings, home occupations, and just to rehash, part one is the severed residential portion, and that would be rezoned to a site-specific A zone, increasing the maximum accessory lot coverage and the maximum accessory building height, merely to recognize the existing structures and to allow them to exist on a smaller lot. It's not actually facilitating new construction. And on part two, the retained lands to a site-specific agricultural zone to prohibit further residential development and to reduce the minimum lot coverage requirement. No public comments were received, other than we did receive one inquiry just seeking clarification on the application, but other than that, no public comments. The region is actually requiring the zoning bylaw amendment as a condition of severance approval, and that was is what basically determined their level of support for the severance. Town Public Works Department did not have any comments, and the Building Department just advised that demolition permits are not required for agricultural buildings. Niagara Conservation Authority had no concerns, nor did Enbridge Gas. And, either myself or the Director of Planning are happy to answer any questions of council or the public.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for that presentation. Holly?
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have the applicants in the meeting, and that would be Joyce and John Saraveld, and they're just turning on their camera. If the applicants had any remarks that they would like to add or comments they would like to add, this would be their time.
We have no further comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would then bring us into the public input portion of the meeting. I can advise council that no pre-registered members of the public have pre-registered to speak tonight, but I will just check our clerks at pelham.ca email address and see if we've received any. Mr. Mayor, I can advise that it is 5:43 p.m. and we have received no emails, and therefore you could close the public portion of the meeting and move into committee input.
Okay, at this time, I will now close this portion of the public meeting, and we will move on to committee input. Is there any councillor who would have comments, questions, statements to make on this application? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That would bring us to the presentation of resolutions. And I would have a motion put forth through Councillor Wink that committee receive report 2021-0053 for information and recommend to council that planning staff be directed to prepare the recommendation report for consideration of adopting the zoning bylaw amendment. If there's any discussion?
Not seeing any.
None. I would start the vote with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
She
Sorry.
said yes.
Oh, Councillor Stewart.
So, sorry, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that motion carries. That does bring us to our next motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, that committee receive the applicant's presentation, verbal presentation for information. And I would start the vote with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Counselor Wink,
Yes.
Counselor Hahn,
Yes.
Counselor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin,
Yes.
and that carries. We don't need a motion to receive any public correspondence or verbal presentations or emails, as we didn't receive any. And therefore, we would move on to a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn that at 5:45 p.m. that this special committee of the whole public meeting under the Planning Act be adjourned unless there is any discussion. Seeing none, I would start the vote with Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Stewart,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, you may gavel out your meeting.
Okay, thank you, councillors. And SLT, this meeting is adjourned.